Many young women are lost to that trap because women crave attention much more than men. It will feel like a colonoscopy. Even though it helps, improves your health and longevity, it is damn uncomfortable in the moment being. At last, it's time for us to talk about those who are around us and are very self-centered. I think many of us are curious about why they're the way they are and what drives them. And in this video, we will be covering different examples of people with narcissistic tendencies. Narcissism is highly promoted by individualism, so expect those traits to become more prevalent in the future. Let's see what we can learn from this video.
Way before the first selfie, the ancient Greeks and Romans had a myth about someone a little too obsessed with his own image. In one telling, Narcissus was a handsome guy wandering the world in search of someone to love. After rejecting a nymph named Echo, he caught a glimpse of his own reflection in a river and fell in love with it. Unable to tear himself away, Narcissus drowned. A flower marked the spot where he died, and we call that flower the Narcissus.
That specific scenario is recognized within many people, and I'm sure that there's at least a couple of acquaintances within your social circle that you could peg as being narcissists. It's like they don't notice anything in their path, and the only thing that is of matter in this life is their own praise, be it superficial or intelligent. And yes, there are a lot of intelligent people who are super narcissistic, and we will cover it later on in this video. Although I would like to warn you that the term narcissist is being thrown very frequently and frivolously in this day and age, so the meaning becomes loose and blurry.
The myth captures the basic idea of narcissism, elevated and sometimes detrimental self-involvement. But it's not just a personality type that shows up in advice columns. It's actually a set of traits classified and studied by psychologists. The psychological definition of narcissism is an inflated, grandiose self-image. To varying degrees, narcissists think they're better looking, smarter, and more important than other people, and that they deserve special treatment.
I come to think about this person that I know. The level of his narcissism goes beyond comprehensible. Get this, every time I meet him, he presents himself formally. Hi, my name is John. And I'm like, John, we've met like 5 times before. Oh, sorry.
Detective.
After this, I'm
Detective.
gone.
No big surprise.
This person is so self-centered. Every time his girlfriend talks about something that concerns her life, he manages to turn that subject around and make it about himself. These are one of the few examples, of course. Basically, most often than not, narcissism can be synonymous with egocentrism, your own well-being. Now, don't get me wrong, we all are egocentric creatures, and we have to be in order to make the best out of the situation and survive and thrive in this life. But there's a point of acceptability and tolerance where you have to serve the community in order to maximize your thriving, but that step gets forgotten, and a narcissist doesn't care for the consequences or damaging his reputation. Of course, such person does everything to cover the dark side of his personality, but eventually it comes up to the surface.
Psychologists recognize 2 forms of narcissism as a personality trait: grandiose and vulnerable narcissism. There's also narcissistic personality disorder, a more extreme form, which we'll return to shortly. Grandiose narcissism is the most familiar kind, characterized by extroversion, dominance, and attention-seeking. Grandiose narcissists pursue attention and power, sometimes as politicians, celebrities, or cultural leaders.
Biased too much? I think they were throwing stones at Donald Trump. Yes, of course, he has some narcissistic tendencies. But understand this, there has to be a healthy amount of ego to get somewhere, to climb up that hierarchy and make yourself a name. For that to happen, deep down, you have to have a belief that you deserve more. And as we know, that man doesn't shy away from flashing his success.
Wrong.
Other examples are Kim K and Kanye. I mean, Kanye is a great artist. I will give him that. But the success has gotten over his head and he got carried away on the wave of self-love. It's easier to recognize successful narcissists because they are less afraid to burn bridges. They're not that dependable on others. So they take every opportunity to display their success.
Of course, not everyone who pursues these positions of power is narcissistic. Many do it for very positive reasons, like reaching their full potential or helping make people's lives better. But narcissistic individuals seek power for the status and attention that goes with it. Meanwhile, vulnerable narcissists can be quiet and reserved. They have a strong sense of entitlement, but are easily threatened or slighted.
Those kind of narcissists are emotionally sensitive and are entitled to their feelings. This is exactly what we can observe with the cancel culture, with the snowflake culture. People find their emotions to be of such value and worth that even if they are not rational, they has to be taken into consideration. It's almost like they want to legislate laws that could protect them from being emotionally hurt. And that's where the danger of emotionality comes into a picture. No one can measure emotions. We cannot find a common ground on something that cannot be measured. Societies has to function through logic and rationale.
In either case, the dark side of narcissism shows up over the long term. Narcissists tend to act selfishly, so narcissistic leaders may make risky or unethical decisions, and narcissistic partners may be dishonest or unfaithful. When their rosy view of themselves is challenged, they can become resentful and aggressive.
Narcissist partners are seeking attention from outside of their relationship because they feel that they're entitled and their needs aren't met. So it's justifiable for them to go out and find some strange, a very temporary affair. It's like wanting chocolate when you're sad and depressed.
It's like a disease where the sufferers feel pretty good, but the people around them suffer. Taken to the extreme, this behavior is classified as a psychological disorder called narcissistic personality disorder. It affects 1 to 2% of the population, more commonly men.
Let me get this straight. The more you let your narcissism and egocentrism to take over your life and dictate your actions, your decisions, the choices you make in life, the more you become devoured by it. And it won't take a long time before you become psychologically affected and permanently go over to the dark side. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where Mr. Hyde kills off Dr. Jekyll.
It is also a diagnosis reserved for adults. Young people, especially children, can be very self-centered, but this might just be a normal part of development. The 5th edition of the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual describes several traits associated with narcissistic personality disorder. They include a grandiose view of oneself, problems with empathy, a sense of entitlement, and a need for admiration or attention.
This is exactly why it's very obvious when you remove your attention from a certain person, that person loses their mind. We all have narcissistic tendencies in us, but for some it gets out of control and they're driven by their never-ending journey of external validation. Many young women are lost to that trap because women crave attention much more than men, so that social media becomes a perfect platform for them to seek satisfaction for their needs. And when you get thousands upon thousands of likes, you become devoured by that chase. You lose your sense of self, and the only thing that you hear in your mind, what's next? What's the next best thing? Narcissism is what happens when you lose your sense of self to your emotions.
What makes these traits a true personality disorder is that they take over people's lives and cause significant problems. Imagine that instead of caring for your spouse or children, you used them as a source of attention or admiration. Or imagine that instead of seeking constructive feedback about your performance, you instead told everyone who tried to help you that they were wrong.
Not being able to take criticism and rationally assess your own mistake is a telltale sign of a narcissist. Your ego is so huge that you won't let anything to damage it.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Even if it means to come closer to the truth, doesn't matter. The only thing that makes you feel good is feeding that narcissistic void of yours, hunger for external validation.
So what causes narcissism? Twin studies show a strong genetic component, although we don't know which genes are involved. But environment matters too. Parents who put their child on a pedestal can foster grandiose narcissism, and cold, controlling parents can contribute to vulnerable narcissism.
That reminds me of spoiled parenthood. I even remember a friend of mine who had a baby and she was crying about not feeling a good of a mother because she didn't know how to make the baby to stop crying. That was a narcissistic tendency from her part. But not only that, it means that you are afraid to be called a bad parent so much that you would give everything to your child in order to avoid that mark. The ego of a parent takes over and the long-term well-being of the child becomes neglected. Nothing fosters a weak and pathetic human being than fully spoiling them in their childhood. Instead of giving them tools to deal with life as an adult, you rob them of self-esteem.
Narcissism also seems to be higher in cultures that value individuality and self-promotion. In the United States, for example, narcissism as a personality trait has been rising since the 1970s, when the communal focus of the 60s gave way to the self-esteem movement and a rise in materialism.
Do I have to say more? I mean, the things that we are seeing today with growth of social media on different platforms. I see kids going around and prepping their TikTok moves, but you have to distinguish that kind of narcissism from a disorder. Digitization gives platform for narcissistic expressions. It doesn't enhance that. The drawback is that people stop editing themselves and blatantly show their egocentric traits, not thinking how it damages their reputation.
More recently, social media has multiplied the possibilities for self-promotion. Though it's worth noting that there's no clear evidence that social media causes narcissism. Rather, it provides narcissists a means to seek social status and attention. So can narcissists improve on those negative traits? Yes.
They can improve if they have the will and discipline. And to have that, you have to admit your own problems. If there's nothing to admit to, then there's no problem to solve. Confessing is the first and biggest step. Admitting to yourself that you have been blind and inconsiderate to others' needs. Only then you can get feedback from others and make improvements.
Anything that promotes honest reflection on their own behavior and caring for others, like psychotherapy or practicing compassion towards others, can be helpful.
I don't believe in psychotherapy as a means of finding yourself and understanding yourself, because at some point a person will attend those sessions just to check off the boxes. It has to come from yourself, from your willingness to understand your nature. That's why when people ask me if I studied psychology or philosophy, I say no. You shouldn't attend a formal education for something that you have passion for. It has to come from an internal drive.
The difficulty is, it can be challenging for people with narcissistic personality disorder to keep working at self-betterment. For a narcissist, self-reflection is hard from an unflattering angle.
Exactly. The ego is very vulnerable, and to question it means to question its existence. So narcissists prefer to live in comfortable lies than seeing the reality for what it is, because it will feel like a colonoscopy. Even though it helps, improves your health and longevity, it is damn uncomfortable in the moment being. Narcissism is a huge problem in intersexual relationships, because those kind of relationships is where you relax and lose your guard and try to be as vulnerable as possible, and the risk for manipulation becomes much higher. And narcissists are great at it. They manipulate you in order to get that affirmation and external validation that they crave so much. You are nothing but a vessel for their needs. Narcissists cannot deal with people with high self-esteem. So for you to understand how self-esteem works and how to improve that, watch this video. But for now, Hossein out!